Hello, welcome to the January 7th, 2025 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the live stream today. If you've not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can submit questions in advance by going to clubcubase at steinberg.de. You could also just simply ask questions in the live chat field, and when asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in real-time manner may soon be eclipsed, so I will do my best to keep up with the questions, and we'll go through the questions chronologically as asked. When asking questions, if you don't see an immediate response, again, we can just make sure that we go through them chronologically so we don't have to repeat the questions. When asking questions, if you could specify which level of Cubase you're running, whether it's 12, 13, or 14, whether it's Cubase, which version level. Also, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, and which operating system, that information is helpful in diagnosing the issue. We also want to, and if you want to search several hours after the live stream ends today, we will have an index of all the topics with timestamps pinned to the top of the comments field. If you want to search for topics been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. We want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that site. We have two people that serve as moderators, Agent K and Jazz Dude. We will give a special thanks to them. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do it to make it a better community experience, and we appreciate everything that they do. We also will give Jazz Dude a special kudos for his efforts with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. It's a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community with different links and tutorials. And once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, which is the Steinberg US distributor, and I'm the host of the live stream today. And I'm presenting from a snowy Alexandria, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. in the United States. If you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. All right, Frozen Genius just says, hi Greg, my mix is too quiet. It's below 0 on the limiter. How can I increase the volume without clipping? Thanks. So there's a couple of different ways to approach this. A lot of times people will think of a limiter as, being used to make something louder, but it often will limit the signal from clipping. So, maybe using a maximizer may give kind of better results. Let's take a look. So let's say if I come here, so the first thing you can do is kind of make sure raise your master fader up, so that will take part and have an impact in the overall levels for the export. But if I wanted to come here, let's put a maximizer on. So we'll go to Dynamics. And now as we come over here, we could increase, we get it kind of optimized, and we have different algorithms. So here we could bring the level up in our mix. Whereas a limiter, you may not notice as much effect until it's kind of crossed into clipping. And then you could run the limiter. So if you increase your master fader here, so let's say we'll come over here to our dynamics, and we'll just go to our limiter plugin. So if this is clipping, the limiter here can prevent that clipping at a particular threshold. So you can say, okay, don't go above minus 2.6 dB or whatever. Most people will set it close to 0. So say minus 0.1. And then if this is clipping, the limiter could bring that down. But if it's not loud enough, try using the maximizer plugin instead. All right, wonderful to see Jazz Dude on. We have Uno Memento checking in from Finland. We have Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat Buddy is waving his paw hello to my cat Steven and Mark Rabin's dog Stella and other pets that are nearby, and he's ready to learn. Great to see Jan on from CubaseIndex.com. He wasn't able to make it Friday. He was on vacation, so Happy New Year to you, Jan. All right, great to see Stefan from Sweden and Vince from Winnipeg. Hope you guys are well. We see Val checking in from Vienna, Austria's Y42. And we have Manfig joining us from Santa Barbara, California. We have Tiago joining from Newcastle. He just says, greetings from Newcastle. Greg, thanks for the Project Logical Editor function about colorizing tracks within a folder. Cheers. So glad that was helpful. All right, Mr. Morpheus just says, hey, Greg, can you tell me how to copy my settings on Cubase channel strip settings order to other tracks, not inserts? Okay, so let's come over here. We'll get to our full screen mixer so we can see this a little easier. Okay, so let's say we have channel strip settings. And I'll just open up this particular channel. Let's set our channel strip. And let's say I want my de-esser right after the noise gate. So let's say if I come over, so we have this channel strip. So let's see if we could just copy. I will load up an insert here. This particular project. So I'm going to select the channel strip heading. We'll see if this works. Copy. And we will come over here to this channel. We'll go to our strip. So we see noise gate de-esser. So we change the order. And we could paste. So we didn't paste the particular inserts. We just, by selecting the header in the mix console, we can copy this channel strip, select a header for a different, so we'll select a different track and come right over there and paste. And we can see that the order that we changed the order of is intact. So we see the de-esser coming before the tube compressor, which usually comes after after the EQ in the default settings, as we could see in these other tracks, but our inserts weren't copied over. So right click on, select the channel, right click on the strip tab header in the mix console, copy, and then paste. So let's see if we could even do multiple tracks. Yeah, this is one track at a time. So, but give that a try and let me know how it works out for you. And thanks for joining us, Mr. Morpheus. All right, we see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo, California. All right, we have Jahian L. Price from Granada Hills. We see Benny from Sweden. Benny asks, is it possible to set a buffer on out of 22 sound cards? So I'm not sure if it's a UR22 or 22. So if we want to set the buffer, we would come over to your studio menu to studio setup. We would select the audio interface here. We go to the control panel, and then we could set the buffer accordingly there. So if you wanted a 32 sample size, you could just select 32 samples for your buffer. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding. So this is with the UR242. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding or if I don't have enough information. All right, wonderful to see Dallas LaRue checking in from Las Vegas. And we have the Inner Landscape sending greetings from Belgium. Thanks for being on with us today. All right, Impulse Music is watching from the British Virgin, maybe the British Virgin Islands. All right, and Inner Landscape asks, can I make a macro with a pre-chosen insert effect every time I create an audio or instrument track? So I currently don't know of a way to do that because there isn't a command to load a particular set of plugins via like key commands to load it up. What you can do is come over, like when you go to add, if you right click, we could say let's add a track, and then we could say so we could say add track, and then there's this function of using track preset, and then you could just come over here and add the track with the preset. So we have our EQs, inserts, channel strips all loaded, but there isn't a way that I found. What I've lobbied for is just to, like when you go to add track, is have a default track preset. So we'll see if that ever gets implemented. That's what I've asked for personally. But currently there isn't a function when you add it to have particular tracks. But if you want, you could just say add track, and then using track preset, you could call it, whatever. You could, give it 4 A's in the middle, so that you can go directly and navigate directly to the track preset over and over again. It would maintain the same track preset throughout. So as you add tracks in a project, that track preset would be selected the next time you go to do it. All right, we have John Costigan checking in from a frigid Wisconsin. And he says, surprise. It is supposed to be cold in Wisconsin. So, all right. We have Abo, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, from Dusseldorf, Germany. Thanks for joining us. And Mountain versus Mountain sending greetings from Timisoara, Romania. Thanks for being online. Val asks, I have had a discussion with a kind of big producer from Germany, and he said he made a huge difference that he started working 88.2K instead of 48K sample rate. What is your opinion on that? So I know there's a lot of mix engineers, like Bob Clearmountain was an advocate of 88.2, being that at the time when people were still delivering CDs, that the math was a little more straightforward than using 96K to convert to a 44.1 resolution file, which at the time when I had a discussion with Bob about this, that was what his thoughts and feelings were. So it could be that the higher sample rates, 88.2 or 96K, will probably have a better sound quality than a lower sample rate of 44.1 and 48K. I would often say that, we've obviously heard a lot of CDs that sound great. So, my running joke is if your audio doesn't sound good, it's maybe not your sample rate's fault. But, you could give it a try and see how it works for your project, and see what you find. So, and it could be like very dependent, if you're doing like a hardcore rap type of production, 88.2 or 96K may not make a huge difference. If you were doing something squeaky clean, think like Alison Krauss or, something like that, then that can make a difference, I think. So it could be depending on the material you're working with. All right, wonderful to see Randy from Pro Wash DFW, and we see Michael Teens also both checking in from Dallas area. Michael from Weatherford, Texas. All right, so Kenny Can asks, when hooking up audio for my guitar, what's the proper way to set my left and right mono or stereo? So if you're recording the guitar directly in or a microphone, if you have one microphone, it could go into either input. You just want to, when we come over, let's say we go to your audio connections and we go to inputs, you just want to make sure that your inputs here, so let's say if I was connected into input 2 with my guitar and input 1 had my microphone, I could have just a stereo. So if I was recording 2 microphones on an acoustic guitar, I would probably choose to record in stereo. If I was recording 1 track of a guitar, like a direct guitar or bass into my audio interface and processing it through like a VST amp simulator, at that point we could do mono input because the guitars will generally have a mono output. Some guitars will have stereo outputs. So if your guitar has a stereo output or 2 independent outputs, if you're a bass player, think of a Rickenbacker bass where you could have 2 outputs where each pickup can have an output, then you could do stereo. I would say 99% of the time it would be mono, and where it doesn't really matter which mono input as long as you know where the input is when you go to add the track. So when we go to add a track, we could choose our audio input. We could come over here. Now if you're recording an acoustic or an electric guitar directly in, your audio interface may have a high Z or a high impedance switch, and sometimes I think my UR242 that I'm currently using has input 2 is a high Z input, and that will be the correct impedance, like the correct level from the instrument going into the interface, so that it's the correct impedance. So it's like seeing it at the proper resistance, the proper gain structure for that. So make sure you do that and just set your input accordingly to where your guitar is connected into. So if my vocal mic was plugged into input 1, I could just come over here and say, okay, we're going to add mono input 2 for the guitar, give it a name, and then hit arm the track for record and hit record. All right, my chat field just jumped to me. Let me find my spot. You see Michael Teams is doing distribution of his virtual ice cream. Okay, DJ Mixes asks, wishes me a Happy New Year to you as well. How can I open the MIDI editor in a separate window with a double click? Greetings from Switzerland, Stefan. Okay, so if we have MIDI track, let me just, and we want to open the editor by default, we'll go into the lower zone. So say if I double click here, we see the MIDI event in the lower zone. If we want to change that behavior, we could come over here to preferences or your settings and go to the editors, and we would say double click opens editor in a window instead of the lower zone, which is default behavior. So now if I have my mix console here, I double click, it's going to open up the MIDI data directly in a separate window. So once again, go over here to Cubase, to Preferences, to Editors. You'll see double click, opens Editor, and you want to choose in a window as opposed to the lower zone. Okay, so we see questions from Benny. He says, is there a possibility to set buffer on the Steinberg UR22 sound card? Can't find it. So again, yeah, so thanks for the clarification. Just come over here. So, this is a UR, so we want to go to your audio system, and we'll see select the audio interface, and then click on the control panel, and then you could adjust the buffer directly right there in the UR22 interface. All right, we have Mark Kohler checking in from the Netherlands. Thanks for joining us today. All right, and Mark has a question. What about latency compensation? So anytime that a plugin is going to be inserted or instantiated or put on a particular track, whether it's on a track, a group, a master bus, all those tracks will have plugin delay compensation. So as soon as we come over here, you don't have to set anything. We would go to the audio track, and any plugin that we would instantiate, we could see that. So if we have different plugins, and if you want to see how much each plugin is causing for latency, we could come over. So I'll add a couple of known plugins that have latency on them. And if we want to, we could actually right click and you go to setup sections. You could actually have a latency control here. So you go to that particular setting. And now as we go to a particular track, we can see, we just see where I have my inserts here. Okay, so we could see what the channel latency is of the plugins, and those plugins will, as Cubase plays back that audio track, it'll say these plugins cause 360 milliseconds of latency, and it will automatically compensate for that latency. Now, where Cubase can't compensate for latency is during real-time tracking. So if you run into scenarios where you're like, okay, I'm doing tracking and I have a lot of plugins and it's really disconcerting with the latency, what you could do is go to the lower left-hand corner and you could activate constrained delay compensation. And when that track is kind of in record enable, that could bypass high latency plugins as soon as that track is in record enable. So if you're tracking and have a lot of plugins going across your mix and you wanted to not have latency be an issue, go to the lower left-hand corner and enable constrained delay compensation. All right, so we have The Myth Disco Dance Latino just saying hi from Poland. Thanks for joining us today. Always great to see Nick on from Essex in the UK. All right, Henry Fleury asks, hi Greg, I'm having an issue where my MIDI track and audio track are inexplicably linked. I can't make any edits to one without the other being affected. Thank you for these videos. They're awesome. All right, so it sounds like maybe they are grouped together. So I'm going to select this event here, and I'm just going to do a quick render in place. Okay, so let's say I have a MIDI event and an audio event here. So when we do this, if we hit Control or Command plus the letter G, these could be grouped together. So when I move one, they will move together. If I kind of crop one, they will crop together. If I split one, they will both split. When I select one, they will see this. Now, as you're doing this, you may see just a little icon here in the upper left-hand corner, kind of almost like a share icon, like you're sharing a file, something similar to that. So in the upper right-hand corner, if we see this, so now if they're grouped, we'll see this icon appear. When they are ungrouped, we can just come right over here, and if we hit Control or Command plus the letter U, now I can edit and move these and do edits independently. So if you see that little icon, that probably means that it is grouped. So try selecting the events. And so as we come over here, so let's say we have these events, hit Control or Command plus U, and that will ungroup, and then they won't be linked together for editing purposes. All right, we have Christian saying hi from France, wishing you a Happy New Year to you as well. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see Hood Boy Terry asks, how can I stretch a sample in Cubase, please? So there's a couple of different approaches. One is if we have an audio file, so let's say if we have a loop, if you want a loop to kind of fit with a particular, to make it fit within a particular project, I'll come over here, let's... All right, so as I drop this in, if I want it to play back kind of in sync, we could just make sure that musical mode is turned on. So right now, if I solo this track and we play it with a click, that track is not going to be in sync with it. But if I put this into musical mode, now that will automatically synchronize to the project tempo. Now, so if it's a loop that needs to kind of fit within the grid, try selecting the event and make sure it's in musical mode. If you want to just take a particular audio event and make it longer, we could come right over here and we go to this the object selection tool. We can select sizing applies time stretch. So if I wanted to take this file, and now when I drag the bottom edge out, I can make this longer, or I can make this file shorter, and that will do time compression on the file. So if you need a loop or an audio material to kind of fit into the musical grid, select it and put it into musical mode. If you want to stretch just by kind of dragging the event, go to your object selection tool, and you could just say sizing applies time stretch. You could also hit the number 1 key on your computer keyboard, and that will toggle between the different modes, and we can see the description of the mode in the yellow as we do this. And so when you see like a little clock, that means it's time stretch, and now it's going to be kind of our normal So come over here, and now we have our normal selection tool. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, Williams Ichigaboja says, greetings from Kogi, Nigeria. I'm in Cubase. How do I bounce my instrument channel to audio channel? We really appreciate it if you could throw more light on this. So just kind of like what we did before. So let's say I have this particular instrument track here. And I could do this for a single track or multiple tracks or a single event, multiple events. So this is our MIDI file. So if I want to turn this into audio, the fastest way to do it if you want to have the audio on the screen is, if I want, I could come, if I have the event selected, I could come directly to my render in place. We can go to our render settings, so we could have our rendered audio be dry without effects and copy over the channel settings that exist in this particular track. We could render the channel settings, so that would be the inserts, EQs, and channel strip. Or if we do the complete signal path, we could choose to render the send effects or the send effects plus the master effects. So if I want to, I have this event selected, I'll say render, and then I have the option here, and by default, I'm just going to choose to mute the source events. So we do that. And now this is rendered as an audio file. So we'll listen to it. So we can hear, we're just playing the audio. Our MIDI event is muted. Now if we wanted to edit the MIDI event, I could come right over here, unmute with the mute tool. And then as we select, but if I have no event selected, I could take the entire track. So let's say I have my track selected. We get some additional options when we go to our render in place. So we'll go to our render edit menu to render in place. We will now choose we could even do stuff like we want to disable and hide the source tracks or remove the source track. So if I don't want to have the MIDI available, I could now just come right over here and render that track, and now it's rendered it as an audio file, and the MIDI information has disappeared because we told it to from our render in place settings. So it's a pretty easy way to do that. All right, so we have Ivan Alexander Cruz Henriquez checking in from Puerto Rico. Thanks for joining us. Been in Puerto Rico twice. Enjoyed myself there. All right, Peter Bada is checking in from Montreal, where it's minus 16 degrees Celsius. All right, my chat field jumped. He's getting ready to ship a cherry snow cone, especially to Michael Teams. All right. All right, so we see Hood Boy Terry says how to stretch a loop when I'm making a beat. So I think we covered that, but if you still want me to do it again, let me know. All right, wonderful to see Gerald Ely checking in from Martinez, California. Thanks for being online with us today. All right, we have, I guess it's Tome de Souza, just saying, hey, what's up? Thanks for being online. All right, so we have a question. Hi, bro. How will I copy one plugin to all the channels in the mixer? Okay. So let's say we have a number of tracks here. We'll go to our mix console. Okay, so let's come over here and just say, okay, I have my inserts. I want, so one of the methods is I could select all of these tracks, hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, or click on the Q link. And now I could go to my inserts here. And once we do this, I can now say, okay, I want the black valve compressor on all of the tracks. And now it's been added to all of the tracks just like that. So, so we could do that. Now let's come over and say if we have this setting, so say we have our Bit Crusher plugin and we have the settings here. So again, if we come over here to our Insert tab, let's copy and let's see if I select multiple events here with Q-Link. And if we go to the Inserts and paste, still going to do one at a time, but we could also come over here if you want to do like all the channel settings. So let's say we have our inserts here plus EQ. So I think if we right click at the bottom of our mixer, we could say copy first selected channel settings. And now I could select all of these, and we could right click at the bottom and paste settings to selected channels. And then we can see that the EQ and inserts have all been copied over just like that. So a couple different approaches you could take. All right, Ivan just says 3 things to implement in Cubase 15. Clips like Ableton Logic, more quick controls, at least 16, and make them function like a macro parameter, or make something like Ableton's audio effect rack. So if you want it to control more parameters than 16, so let's say if I'm here on a particular track, you could use the modulators for this. So let's say I have we'll just come over here. I'll activate some different functions. Okay, so I want to control multiple parameters on this particular channel. So if we go to our modulators here, one of the things we could do is make a macro knob. So I could come over here, let's learn, okay, I want to control my threshold. Click here, I want to control my EQ 3 frequency. Okay, let's come over here. Let's control this plugin parameter. And let's come to our Bit Crusher. So I want to control this parameter. Let's keep going. Now I want to control that parameter into Bit Crusher. Let's go to my EQ, P1A. I want to control this knob, and let's say channel panning. All right, so now when I control this one knob, I can just come over here and control these 8 parameters. So we look at our first 4 parameters here. So as we control those, and if I wanted to, if I go to my MIDI remote, I'll just take this, we'll go in here to our focus quick controls. So let's just go back to the modulators, and now I could right click here and say MIDI remote, pick for MIDI remote mapping, apply the mapping, and now this one knob on my MIDI remote is controlling up to 8 different parameters that we could completely automate as well. So that way, you know, one quick control or one focus quick control can control 8 different parameters. So you could control 64 parameters if you really wanted to. And also, once you have your quick controls, you could have multiple banks of quick controls defined. So, and have a button switch between multiple banks of 8 quick controls. So give a couple of those things a try and see if they make sense. All right, so we see question, when I open the Iconica Sketch template, Hallian only receives MIDI data through channel 16 in Hallian. However, in the inspector it says all MIDI inputs. How to fix this? Okay, so let's see if I could load up the template. I'm not sure if it's a built-in template. Well, take a look. Or if it's something you got from like the Cubase Nation Discord. Yeah, so I'm not sure if it is, so, but let's say if I come over here, do just quick. Okay, so I'll just do a quick empty one. All right, so let's say we have flute in MIDI channel 1. All right, and let's say basses in channel 16. All right, so I'm going to, let's say we add an instrument. I'm going to add a MIDI track here. Okay, and I'm going to put this onto MIDI channel 16. All right, so when I have this track, I have my flute. When I come here, so when we look at this, we're going to see in all MIDI inputs, so that's the MIDI port, but we could also choose to specialize the input channel. So if you have, depending which version you're on, so if you have a controller that's transmitting, by default this will be set to any input. So when I come over here, what is sending the MIDI data to the instrument is the output channel that we see here. So now when I have this MIDI track is only going to send to channel 16 on my Hallian Sonic port where I have the basses loaded up. When I come here, it's only going to send to the MIDI channel 1. But if your controller is kind of in different zones and each zone is transmitting a different MIDI channel, at that point, you could set specific inputs. And that came in 13, I believe. And if you have earlier versions, if we go to the routing, you could go directly to your channel inspector, or you'll see an input transformer. So if we open up our panel here, we can now see that we could have different presets, factory presets for channel filtering. So this way we can say this channel is only going to pass channel 1. And if we have a controller that's transmitting on 16 MIDI channels, it'll ignore every MIDI message that's not on channel 1. So you could use the input transformer in earlier versions to filter out those particular channels, but Cubase will take incoming MIDI messages by default and send it and accept all of those. So if you have multiple controllers transmitting on different MIDI channels, it's not necessarily the input channel that is set. So we see all MIDI inputs, that's going to be for the port, not for the channel. And with 13 and 14, we could set a specific MIDI channel for the input. Earlier versions, you could use the input transformer. So in version 12, this moved to here. Earlier versions, you'd see a little squiggly line. 11 and earlier, you see like a little squiggly line here on a MIDI or instrument track, and that would open up the input transformer. And then you could filter out particular channels. All right, wonderful to see Razel Zemini checking in from Denmark. All right, Mark King asks, using macros in the Project Logical Editor to filter mixer views by track name, filtering and hiding, how can I hide VSTi output channels once they are visible as part of a mix view? So let's say if we have like our Hallian Sonic, we go to our mix console here, so we see our Hallian Sonic and we have our MIDI track. But let's say in our Hallian Sonic, we've activated multiple outputs in the mix section. So we'll come here and I want the basses to go out of output 2, that those will be hidden. So when I play, I see the flute going out of output 1, and then we could have the bass going out of output 2. All right. So how can I hide VST output channels once they are visible as part of a mix view? All right. So let's say if I want to come here, so we can see that this is going to be set to slot 16. See if there's just so if you're not using like those particular sounds, like let's say we don't have the output, all we would have to do is if we come over to the VST instrument rack, we could just now come over here and we see the outputs that we could, when we go to activate outputs, We could choose to turn off and on outputs directly from there. So we can say, okay, there's slot 16. So you could hide them from the instrument just directly right from. So if you had configured it and then chose not to use the independent output from the instrument, you could just hide it by going to the instrument rack here, and you could go to activate outputs, and we could turn on all of your outputs, turn them off directly right from here. So let me know if that makes sense for your workflow, Mark. All right, so we have a question. Says, can you edit MIDI? Let me just read this. Can you edit MIDI in a track itself without opening an editor? So you could do like basic cut, copy, paste, but if you wanted to see the MIDI in the track, you could open up what's called an in-place editor, which is like Control or Command plus Shift plus I. And then while it's not in a separate edit screen, we could just come over here and then we could open up the MIDI editor directly on the project window. So Control or Command plus Shift plus the letter I. And then on a selected track, you could have the in-place editor so that we can just edit. And there's also, if you right click, you go to your track control settings, and you'll probably see edit in place. It may be, so again, to get here, right click to track control settings, and then we'll say edit in place. I want to take it from a hidden control to a visible control. So now anytime I want to edit, I could just click on this icon right here and open the in-place editor without having to open a separate edit window. All right, wonderful to see Pertti Komenen checking in from Finland. Thanks for joining us. And Michael Teams has granted my family and myself 1 gallon of Texas blackberry ice cream. And it's just telling us to stay warm. Thank you for that, Michael. It's appreciated. So we have George checking in from Germany, wishing everyone a happy 2025. Thanks for joining us today. Michael Graybill's checking in from a chilly Dallas. He's hoping that everyone's keeping warm. I think the storm that's in Texas is going to be hitting us. We'll have 2 snowstorms in 1 week on Friday night, Saturday morning. Wonderful to see Kai Wen Franklin on. Thanks for joining us. Right. Great to have Neil Conway on. So it's nice to be able to check in. All right, so Ivan Alexander also wants make the video editor to support ping/TIFF image files to export audio and video. Ideas to make Cubase export the album cover art with the music, audio, 24-bit wave, 1080p video. So if you create a video that does that, you could export with the video if you wanted to. So, but you know, we could do that in Wavelab, but generally it's not a video. It's going to be just a static image that will be read by different services metadata. So it's not a video function for that. But like if we go to our Wavelab program, so if we did a video like that, that wouldn't be recognized by any streaming service. So it's particular metadata. So if you have Wavelab, and we go to the album wizard, here we could, or could just come over here to your metadata, and let's say if we go to, ID3 tags here. You can put the picture image, and this is kind of specified metadata that's part of the standard that will be read by all the different streaming services. So it's not a video that's read by that if you want it to be recognized by different streaming services. But I'll pass it along as a feature request, but you could do that in the mastering program very easily, like in WaveLab. There you see Recyclop also checking in from Finland. So we have our Finland contingent on and present today. All right, James Stewart asks, how do I align a multi-track recorded session to the grid when a BPM is set incorrectly in the project? Okay. See if it's in. Let me just open up a project here. It wasn't recorded to the click. Okay, so there's two approaches for this. One is if you want the click to actually follow the, if you want the click to actually follow the source material, or if you want the source material that's recorded and not following the click to conform to a click track. So let's say we have like a jazz piece here, and I'll open up so we can see that it's not really conforming to the click track. So what I'm going to do is select like an overhead drum track, and we will go to your project menu and we will do a tempo detection. So we'll just come right over here, we'll analyze the tempo. Okay, so we figured out where the tempo is, and when it does this, it's going to give you a signature of 1/4, because we don't necessarily assume all music is in 4/4 time. So we're going to find the downbeat of our project. Okay, so it looks like we have this pickup note, and it's actually going to start right there as our 4/4. So now. So now we have the grid. So the grid is now following the actual music that was recorded. So that's often the goal that people will have. And now we may run into the goal where we want to take this recording with its natural tempo variations, and we want this recording to actually play back on the grid. So I want this recording that is changing ever so slightly musically, and I want to be perfectly aligned to the grid. So I'm going to select all of the events. Let's go to the audio menu, to advanced, and we will choose set definition from tempo. All right, and we could do this at the project or embed the data. So what this is going to do is take the metadata, the tempo changes of every single beat, and apply it into the particular file. So we can see that we have variations in tempo here, roughly. So as we start off, roughly around 144 beats a minute. So I could turn this off and just type in a new tempo. So it's not following our tempo track, but now everything is playing back perfectly at 144 beats a minute. Or if I want it to be 164. or I want to take it back to the original tempo, and if I wanted to take the tempo changes here, and if I wanted those to be kind of tightened up, I could make those tighter and kind of bring so that there's less fluctuation, but there's still some natural variation. So if you want the tracks to, if you want to set the grid to the track, select a track that's going to give kind of a rhythmic pulse that's going to be used throughout. Drum, like kick or snare, overheads are also good. And then you're going to be able to do, from the project menu, a tempo detection, find the downbeat, and type in the correct meter. And then if you want the tracks that have varying tempo to now conform to a strict tempo or to change the tempo overall, you could select all of the events, come over to audio, to advanced, and set definition from tempo, and then you could change the tempo, and all the tracks will just follow and almost be like a parasite to the tempo, if you will. All right, John Costigan has now received has passed the bar, and saying as our attorney, he advises us to power slam the like button. So. All right, so how does it sound? Can I ask something? So yeah, just ask it in the chat field. All right. Yeah, and please ask. That's why we do these live streams. All right, so the next question, how can you save a sample you have edited in the sampler control window in Cubase 13? All right, so let's say if we are here, so I'm going to add, let's say in the sampler control window, so let's come over here, we have our sampler control. I'll just drag a file in here. So let's say we have this. All right, and I want this to do a fade in, and we'll choose a different start position, fade out. All right, so say we have that. So I want to save this as a preset. So we come right over here. Let's save a track preset. We'll call this January 7th. Okay. Now if I want to go to a new project, and anyone that's celebrating Orthodox Christmas, Merry Christmas today. All right, so we will go to user presets, to our sampler track. See track preset sampler, and we'll see our January 7th, 2025, and drag that in, and now we could have so once again, save it as a track preset here. And to open it up, you want to go to User Presets, Track Presets, Sampler. Then all of your sampler presets could be accessed directly there. Michael Teams is granted Neil Conway 1 gallon of limoncello ice cream. Sounds good. All right, so how does it sound? It says I'm user Cubase since version 2 on Atari ST. That's when I got into it myself. Now Cubase Pro 13. Can I add Motif XF as a controller in Cubase? Previous versions can do this. So yeah, certainly. So any time that you would connect, you could connect it via MIDI, like a 5-pin MIDI cable. The most common connection now will be just connected via a USB driver. You'll install the Yamaha Steinberg USB driver. And then you'll see under all MIDI inputs, like I have my Panorama, my Nectar Panorama P4, and now I could just come right over here and I could trigger all of my MIDI devices right from here. So anything that passes MIDI into the operating system. So you could, if it has, you could connect it via USB, install the Yamaha Steinberg USB MIDI driver, and then that will be available to use over USB, or take the MIDI output and then connect it into, if you have an external MIDI interface or MIDI interface with a 5-pin DIN cable, like the older MIDI cables that were on the Atari ST. You could connect it, and you may have to, by default, the Motif can work either in transmit MIDI over USB or over the MIDI port. So if you do it over the MIDI port, you may have to go into the system setup of the Motif and tell it to transmit the MIDI from USB to the MIDI port. But yes, you could definitely use that. And thanks for joining us on the live stream. Michael Teams says kind words, says whack the like button. Keep this wonderful resource available for everyone. Greg is Yoda. So I still think I'm taller than Yoda. All right, so Hood Boy Terry says, thank you very much. How to make my vocal show the track in the lower zone. So if you want to see like the vocal in the lower zone. All right, so what I would do is, let's say this is my vocal track here. If I double click, that will launch it into the lower zone editor. And if I wanted to even come over here, if you have Cubase Artist or Pro, we could just double click. And now we could do all of our very audio editing. So if you want to do horrible edits like that. So that's how you could kind of see the vocal. So just double click. By default, it will go into the lower zone, and there's different editing views that you could switch between by clicking on the tabs when the inspector is open. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, Bratman Studio asks, hey Greg, I did something unexpected. I was pulling several tracks to the left with the Option key, and a bar didn't duplicate. It made the bar twice as long and gave it a halftime feel. Okay, so probably you're in a kind of an alternate mode, like that time stretch mode. So say if I move this event here, and if we come over here, so it's probably going to be where when we drag this, so let's listen to it here just real quick. And I'll turn off the automation because I think we're after a fade out. So if we are in sizing applies time stretch and I drag this out, to make a copy. We've now time stretched it to last longer. So yeah, generally when we're duplicating an event, we would just kind of grab it, by the right center edge. You could do that in the center, but if we are in sizing applies time stretch, that when we drag this by the bottom left or bottom right, that we can now change the length. So we could just come over here. So make sure that you're in kind of the right sizing mode. And it could be like if you hit the 1 key above the Q on like an English keyboard, that would switch between the modes. You want the mode without any extra little icon. This is sizing moves contents, sizing applies time stretch, and normal sizing. So if I hold down my Alt key here, Alt or Option key, I could duplicate by going, if I do it correctly this time, that we could do that. But if we have the wrong sizing mode, the wrong selection mode, that will stretch the audio out as you described. All right, so you see Jack C just saying, how on earth do I crossfade comp takes? All right. All right, so let's say we have all right, so one thing you can do is make sure that when you do a cut that you're at the 0 crossing. So let's say as I come over here, let's do some quick comping between different takes. All right, now one of the things that you could do is as we do our edits is you could just say there's an auto fades section. So we can say, okay, let's just do auto crossfades. And this will just apply crossfades during playback for each of the sections. So we can say, okay, if I have this turned off, you may hear a click or pop on some of the transitions. Here's one there. So we heard a little. So I'm just now going to turn this on, and we'll just say auto crossfade between the events. So we didn't hear a crossfade there. Let's see if we hear a click here. So that's automatically just applying crossfades to all the edits so that you don't have to do crossfades. But let's say if we come over here and we have our comp take, I could probably just manually, let's select just a quick range here. If I wanted to hit the X key, we could do crossfades if necessary. But a lot of times when people are doing crossfades, it's to eliminate a click or pop. And the real-time crossfades, while you don't see them, will audibly eliminate the clicks and pops. So give that a try. All right, so wonderful to see Pablo Vasquez on, the wonderful drummer from the group Hot Mess from Spain. Thanks for joining us today. All right, Tony San asks, hello friend, do you know how to make the transport bar to come back to the original position when I press the space bar? Okay, so let's say I'm starting here at measure 6 beat 2. If we go to your transport, so in 13 this was kind of shifted, so it made it from a preference that people couldn't find, and they got used to finding the preferences. And now we made it a bit more obvious. So if we go to your transport menu, we see start modes. We could say return to start position on stop. So I'm going to start right from here. I'll leave the cursor roughly where we are. So now I hit the space bar. We go right back. With that disabled, so again, transport to start mode and uncheck. I put my range tool there. Now when I stop, it's going to continue directly on from that point. So go to, again, transport, start mode, and make sure that the return to start position is checked there. All right, so we see Williams just says, thank you so much. I really appreciate, with a rose. Thank you very much. All right, we have Tom Messina sending greetings from Franklinton, North Carolina. Thanks for joining us today. Pablo's happy, saying, hey, hey, hola. Michael Team's very happy to see Pablo on. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped on me. All right, let me find my spot. I think I'm close. Hang on, my son's home from school with snow. He has a question for me. Hang on. All right, my son is going to hang out on the live stream. We had a snow day from school today, so he's going to hang out in my office with me for a bit. All right, Michael Teams is very happy to see Pablo on the live stream. All right, got your asks. I know you can't recreate this problem, but do you have advice on what to do when you get a corrupted file? I can usually get the song open, I just can't save. It's a VST instrument causing the problem. So one thing you could do is that is good if you get a corrupted project or a plugin is corrupting something, is just come over to go to import, and we could say tracks from project. We could come right over here. Let's select the particular project. And if you know it's like one particular file, what you could do is, select all and say, okay, it's this one plugin that's causing a problem. So I would try to maybe import everything here. So this isn't necessarily working with the project file, but we can import everything kind of independently and then resave it. So that will often work if you know it's like one particular instrument and it still doesn't open after doing that. You can import all of the tracks from the project except for that one particular one. And then maybe, open that one, open everything, and maybe do the same thing and import that one track into a project. If you have a suspicion that is the culprit, that track is causing problems, see if you could open that one independently, and then you could, once you have if you want to take that one track and merge it with like all the other tracks that were imported in a different pass, you can import. Once you save that one track as a project, you could import that. So, but often allowing you to import tracks from a project can help mitigate where there is a problem with a plugin that's corrupting the project. See, Pablo's forgotten his Cubase question again. glad to hear that Peter is fine and that I'm getting a pronunciation of his name correct. Mesa Guitar Guy says, I had a question about Pro 24 for Atari ST. I could go back to version 2 of Cubase, but I never ran Pro 24. I was a little late to the party. I was running other software until I was enlightened and became a Cubase user in college. All right, FlyV asks, what is the AQ button? Does it automatically quantize as you record? So yes. So let's go ahead and show it. And this is for MIDI. It's not going to do it for audio. But I'll come over here. I will... All right, so let's say I have, so when we see the AQ button, this will be on the transport. So I'm going to say my quantize values are set to quarter notes. Okay, and what I want to do is I'm going to record. I'll just do something silly like that. All right, so now when I go to listen to my recording, so we could, so a lot of people will put in hi-hats and snares that way and just, so everything could be quantized. Now, even though we quantized it on record so that it's playing straight quarter notes, if we wanted to go back to the original recording, if we come over here, we could choose to reset the quantize. Let's see, so let me just turn that off. Let's see, I think we could reset the quantize. And once we reset the quantize, everything that I just played in would automatically, so what we quantized on input is still recoverable after. But it's like if you want to put in just hi-hats or something, there's like straight 16th notes on a part, you could just kind of put in anything and it would quantize it on input, so it auto quantize. Again, that's going to be for MIDI information, not for audio. As he got yours saying the offending VST instrument that's crashing his songs is Loom 2. Sorry you're running into that. So we see Pablo says I had to use Logic for a few days. What a nightmare. That suits Cubase more, and that's why I still love it. All right, Gerald Ely says, hey, Greg, if my Loop Mash library has a problem and I wanted to reinstall, would I have to throw out the old one? So if you reinstall, you don't have to necessarily, if you go back to the earlier version and do a reinstall, it will write it into the same location, so you don't have to necessarily delete and then reinstall. It will kind of, because it's going to be the same files, it will replace the existing files if you do it through the Steinberg download assistant. See, Pablo's asking if anyone has the new Nectar Panorama driver, maybe for the CS12 controller. It's kind of like an updated, it's kind of like a CC121 controller. All right, Bratman Studio says 99 watching, but only 50 likes. Slap the like button, friends. All right. right, so we see TP Beldy says, I wish we would have got MIDI scrubbing in the piano roll. So if you come here, you know, MIDI is like different than audio in that, you know, it's actually going to be triggering a particular note. But if we, let's see if I just come over here. So if we just grab the scrubbing tool, you know, and we go, you know, it's not going to work necessarily. But if you go on the project window, you could scrub over top of the MIDI event. So, and then if you hit just the left and right arrows within the editor, so say I just come over here. I'm going to go backwards. So you go backwards. Just by holding down the left arrow, holding down the right arrow, or if you want to go on the event itself, you can scrub like so. All right, so we have UFO Canada, UFO Galaxy Beverly Beatty saying hello, running Cubase 12 with Windows 11. All right, he says, question is, I want to create a bus for my 4 tracks of vocals. The goal is to control the amount of signal in FX VST, such as reverb delay, without sidechain activated, does not muddy up the vocals. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. Let's see if I still have this one project. Yep, some background vocals. Okay, so let's say we are here.
All at once, you kissed my face. The world was like a brand new place. Felt my fears all fly away. Don't it make you feel good? Knowing that somebody loves you.
All right, so if I wanted to create a,
Don't it make you feel good?
so all we would have to do is select these particular tracks. I could now right click and we'll say add track, and we want to add group track to selected tracks. So now we do that. My group track will now control the volume.
Knowing that somebody loves you. Don't it make you feel? Don't it
So let's say we're here.
feel good? Knowing that somebody loves you. Don't it make you feel good? Knowing that somebody wants to give you their heart. Somebody wants
So now
to
we'll come over
take
here.
you just the way you are. Don't it make you feel?
And then once it's here, I could apply
Knowing that somebody
an EQ.
Somebody loves you.
And we could come over here, just add reverb and delay on.
To be surrounded, take you just the way you are. Don't it make you feel good?
So this is the group channel.
Knowing that somebody loves you. Somebody loves you.
So to get them into group, select your background vocal tracks, right click, select add track, add group track to the selected channels, and then on the group track you could EQ, send all these to a particular effect of your choice to make it sound a bit more cohesive with the processing. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we have a question from Achilles who asks, is it possible when I export 10 songs with cycle markers to select or deselect all at once? I think when we do this that you'll have to select each of the cycle markers independently. So let me just see if I have a project in my recents list. Okay, so let's say I have these songs, and I'll just add new marker track. Okay, so we have our cycle markers here. All right, so now when we want to come over here, we'll get a file to export audio mix. Now we can see our cycle markers. Now let's just see. Okay. So I don't think that there is a select all sometimes. But what you can do, so let's say if we have our markers, and I'll just name these markers quickly. Okay, so now we have these marker tracks named. Let's go to our export audio mixdown. All right. And I'll just add some more cycle markers. Okay. All right, so let's go to our file, export audio mixdown. All right, so we have, let's say, 8 marker tracks. So if I come over here, I'm just going to select all these and then click into checkbox. Now each of them are selected. There isn't necessarily a select all command, but if you want to select multiple ones, just hold down your left mouse button, and then we could multiply select or deselect our different cycle markers here in the export dialog box. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Achilles. So it's kind of a 2-step process, but it's better than checking multiple marker tracks simultaneously. All right, asks how to change the note value of selected notes in the score without changing the MIDI notes. The display quantize affects all notes. I just want to change the note value display of selected notes. So, okay, so I'm not sure. This would be different behavior in 14 versus 13. So I'm going to assume we're in 14, but let me know if. All right, so let's say if I'm here, all right, so let's say if I want to select like all these B flats, all right, and then if we wanted to just come right over here, you could just come over and switch the spelling of the notes directly there. In earlier versions, there's where you could just kind of switch the enharmonic spelling of the particular notes, but you could just kind of do it directly here as well by just going into info line. But let me know if you're running 14 versus 13 or earlier, because that could change how it works. All right, so we see from Val, it says, dude, I can't believe what kind of discussion my sample rate question triggered on Reddit. They're just know-it-alls who all say different things. It's so weird. Yeah, I found out if you don't want to find an answer for something that you look on Reddit, and, you know, there's a bunch of people who answer questions who, you know, but it's always interesting. Just, you know, try yourself and, you know, do just a quick recording, you know, do a recording of something, or, you know, take a recording from one computer and record it at 88.2 in one session, record it at 44.1 or 48K in a different session, export it, and see if you notice a difference. All right, Tommy N asks, the chord notation in the chord track isn't being reflected correctly in the score. For example, C add 9 is displayed as C9 and C diminished shows up as C minor flat fifth. Is there a way to fix this issue? So yeah, there's some preferences. So if we want to come over, go to preferences, and under event display, we'll see chords and pitches. So let's say you have a, we'll do a new custom chord. So let's say we have a C9 chord. So we'll say a C. All right. We'll keep the fifth. So let's say, so here we could, let me just remove. All right, so let's say we have, all right, so we see, like if this is going to be set up as a, so we see like C9. So if we want to come here, I think we could just say add 9. So now when we have a chord track, okay, so now we'll come into, and we could just see that the ninth chord here is just notated as a G9 chord. So let me just, all right, just gonna, for example, C9 is, so I come here, so, but again, we could just change, let me just see if those are being carried over. So again, preferences, or settings. Let me hit apply here. Okay, let me just, all right, let me just check the preferences here. Yeah, so I know in the earlier versions that it would do that. Let me just check to see if there's any. We come over to, yeah, so I'll pass that on to the team, but I know in earlier versions that may not just be linked yet to how that is displayed from the preferences, but I know in the previous score editor that it was that we could change it in the score view. Here, just make sure I'm doing this right. And let's look at the diminished chord. So we'll say minor third, and let's say flat fifth. Yeah, I'll mention that to the team that those preferences aren't linked up to the chord definition. Doesn't seem like it is to me currently, but I'll make sure to mention that to the team. Sorry about that. All right, so wonderful to see the artist known as Love on. Okay, so we see Mark King just says, "Hi Greg, but I don't want to see the VSTi outputs if the mix view is showing the primary instrument, but don't want to see them for other mix windows. I want this to happen for my Stream Deck." You know, so if the instrument has multiple outputs and it's engaged, it's going to show in the mix console. So, which I think makes sense. So if I come here, let's say, and we're in, let's say, Holly and Sonic. Here we open up the instrument. And even if we don't have anything there, so let's say if I'll just throw in a quick instrument, channel 2. So as soon as they're activated, I think that they're going to immediately show up in the mix console, which, you know, so if you didn't want them to be seen in the mix console, so I'm not sure if you're doing everything with a template or not, but once that they are there and once they've been activated, like the outputs of the VST instrument have been activated, so we can see that these are now all activated. So I don't think that there's a way from the project logical editor to hide tracks that don't have. I'll take a quick look, but you know, if there's nothing being sent to them, so let's say if we want to select an output name, if we choose this, like, I'm not sure if you have these all configured in kind of a template already. So let's say if we activate our outputs, all right, so let me just, so it might be hard unless you've gone through and named every one, but I don't think that we could set a filter condition of like there's no audio being sent to it. So let's say we want to select yeah, so I don't think that there's a way to set that. So let's see if we, Yes, I don't know of a way to immediately hide all of the tracks. So I'm not sure if you're starting from a template and you have everything kind of set, but you don't have anything routed to it. You could maybe, like, if while everything is playing, within the mixer, so say, if you just choose show only tracks with data between the locators, maybe, but if you can let me know why you have it activated but no audio going out to it, but maybe you could just use the condition of set the left and right locators and show only the tracks that have, so here we show all channels, but maybe if you have the left and right locators set, so we see that these are our outputs here. If we say choose tracks with data between the locators, that those get hidden. And that's a function that you could trigger from your Stream Deck. All right, so we have maybe productions by Abe Howell checking in. All right, Fernan Dust just says, hi Greg, just want to let you know that the increase primary and secondary parameters key commands are not working. Okay, so let me just see if we could get that. I don't think I've ever used those key commands, but all right, so this will be so I don't think I've ever used those key commands. But I will do some more investigation and pass it on if it's not functioning. Thanks for letting us know. But maybe, Fernan, let me know exactly what you used a function for, if it was like for moving parameters or a different function, so I could test it. All right, Brett Macias asks, how do I create a smooth tempo change, i.e. accelerando, rallentando? All right, so if we have a tempo map here, all right, so you may have to kind of extend this over to the right, so, and we can see that once it's extended, we can see the label for this field. So if I want to do a step, and we enter in a new tempo value. So when I come here and we put our step in, just activate. Tempo track. So now as I put in, let's say, a step value here, it's going to immediately jump down. But if we switch this to ramp, now we could just have it do a smooth transition for retard or an accelerando. So just switch this value here, but you may not think to expand it just a little more over to the right. See, Dr. McFarland Studio says that is slick. Wish I knew what it was, but glad you liked it. All right, Zephaniah asks, hey Greg, how do I get the MediaBay to audition with sound? There's no sound using Cubase 13 Pro on PC. So when you come over to your MediaBay, if you have, so let's say if we're here, you could audition right here, but this could be kind of tied in with your control room. So make sure if you come over here, go to your audio connections. So I always have an output defined but not connected. And then I have the output defined when I right click and we add a monitor. That when I come over here, this is where my audio outs are connected. And now once I do this, we could audition all my different loops. So, and sometimes this happens when people have the control room activated or the control room turned, let's say the control room is turned on. So now when I come over here, I don't hear anything in my loops. So again, just make sure you have your control room turned on, and then you could audition all your loops very easily. All right, next questions right along these lines. How do you create a mono mix in a control room so I could switch from stereo to mono listening when mixing? Okay, let me just get a different, take this project here. We'll revert it. All right, so we go to our control room and there are down mix presets. So you may have to open up this particular tab. So we can say, okay, I want to listen to it in stereo. And then we could just listen to it now in mono. See what it is in mono. So you'll see a down mix section, and if you're in 14, you might have to go to right click and set up sections and make sure that your down mix is enabled right there. All right, Kamaljeet Singh asks, when I turn on musical mode on a sample in my project, the tempo speed changes. Why? Because it's adapting the speed of the playback to the tempo of the project. So right now we'll come over, we'll drag a loop over. All right, so I drag this loop over, let's say we're not in musical mode. So but it's maybe not be synced with the project. All right, so now that I select the event and we put it into musical mode, it's now going to fit and align with the tempo of our project. So we can now hear that that loop is playing back in sync with the metronome. When I disable musical mode, it's playing at its original tempo, but when you have it playing musical mode, it's going to sync to the tempo of the project. Original tempo, project tempo. And if I change my tempo of the project to something slower, now it will speed up, because so as soon as I do this, take out musical mode. So musical mode is going to automatically make it play back at our project tempo. So if you want your loops, when you drag and drop them in your project, to automatically fit in with the tempo and timing of the project, that's when musical mode is activated, and that's what it does. Gerald Ely didn't have great times, and the one time he went skiing. So yeah, we have good skiing weather here for the first time in a long time. Pablo is just saying the singer in the project, Andrea, doesn't need the very thing. So she's pretty good. There you can see Gerald Elias pop out for a little bit. All right. All right, so we see from Chris, in a new drum track, is there a way to adjust the speed of a sample the same way you could adjust the speed in the sample instrument track in warp mode? So let's take a look. I'm not sure if there is. I think it's more intended for kind of one-shot samples, but let's give it a try. Okay. So I don't think that there's any warping like we have in but I think if we do it in Groove Agent, that we could do the warping there. So let's say I don't know a way to automatically do warping. We could do it in the sampler track. I'll just make sure I'm not missing. Yeah, so I'll show you in Groove Agent, which could be kind of a similar workflow. And we can make that work with the pattern events as well. If I add the right instrument, that would help. So within Groove Agent, if we come here, so here in Groove Agent, we could enable audio warp so that we could sync to the tempo of the project. So, but it's not a function in a new drum machine, but once you have your samples here, we could still, if you go into the editor, we can just come over here and use the drum editor with Groove Agent as well. All right, so we see Jacques Corb just says, thank you. Just Nice Music asks, how do I relieve CPU overusage in Cubase 14 Pro? So the first thing to always do is, and a lot of people will track at lower buffer sizes and then raise the buffer sizes as they go on. But if we go to your studio setup, select your audio interface and, increase the buffer size. So go to the control panel. So that can help. If you have lots of instruments, it could be sometimes, one particular instrument may make your CPU crawl. It's just, sounds great, but it's, could be 8 instruments or synth engines layered to make that one sound. Choosing to render in place a particular file and disabling the track, it could free up CPU usage, and it's going to play back just a simple audio file, as opposed to all the computations needed to run 8 synth engines or whatever is going on. So you could choose to freeze tracks or render them in place. If you're, reasonable at a point where all the editing is done, that's a good approach. So I would do those things first. Try to take your virtual instruments, render them. If you're doing lots of virtual instruments, render them, and you could disable the MIDI tracks and then enable them if you need to make edits. But if you're just doing straight audio, it could be, there's a lot of people that will go into their mix console and run a reverb a reverb as an insert across 16 channels, as opposed to having those 16 channels access one reverb, that is accessed via an effect send. So those are some different use cases. So, if you have multiple things that are sharing, multiple tracks that are sharing a reverb or delay, instead of loading them on each individual track as an insert, load it as a send, and send each track varying amounts with the send control to the one single reverb or delay. All right, so Hood Boy Terry asks, this is my last question. How can I change my loop key to match with others? Okay, so let's just do new project here. Okay, so let's say okay, so let's say I have this going on. All right, so I'm going to put this into musical mode so that when we want to put in our files, they will automatically be in musical mode. So let's say we have 8 measures of drums here. All right, so now we could also come over here and, in 14, one of the great things that was added is, let's say I have, we could set a project. This was in earlier versions. Let me just put this in loop. Is that we could set a project root key. So you may have to right click up here. And we can say, okay, I want to go to my project root key. And then once the project root key has been added, we can see it here. So let's say I want to be in the key of D. So I want to find maybe So I'm going to drop that in. And let's find from a different library. So we could actually just kind of have this automatically follow to the transpose track if we want. This is new in 14, so let's say different library here. All right, so now we can say, okay, let's put this in the key of D. So, but even, let's find something more appropriate here. All right, so now I'm just going to drag this over. And we can see that that's going to automatically now kind of change. So while this is in a different key of C major, now we could drop it in, and it's transposing it to the key of the bass. So if we change kind of the project root key here, let's say to E, so at that point you could have all the different parts automatically. If you don't want something to transpose, we could just choose it to be independent. Now when we change the project root key, this will automatically take the different parts. So maybe the drums we don't want to transpose, but the bass and Rhodes part we do. So we could just kind of select those, and if you want those to transpose or not, when you drag and drop them in, they'll automatically kind of conform to your project root key. And you could ask more questions, Hood Boy Terry, if you want. There's no limit. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped. I think we're okay. See, Bratman Studios says that hitting the one key was the solution to doing that. So yeah, we have users hit the keys wrong and set up different modes all the time. So. All right, so Pablo says, lately I'm having some licensing problems with Groove Agent with Alan Morgan's signature drums 1 and 2. Wasn't this included in Absolute or Groove Agent? So I think it's included with the full Groove Agent. But if you want to send me a screenshot, Pablo, I'd be happy to take a look at it for you. But I think it's going to be like with the Groove Agent license, like the full Groove Agent, maybe not Groove Agent SE. All right, so the artist known as Love just says, please say hello to your son from us all. So I did already when I was offline for a couple minutes, so he's enjoying his snow day. All right, so we have Craig William Dayton. Great to see you. It has been many years since I attended your classes at Washington Music Center. I was caregiving and could not get down. Do you still have classes there? So I haven't been doing them since COVID. So we kind of migrated to doing more of these, but hopefully we can, we have an end of our fiscal year is March 31st, so we might have budgets for me to be able to do it after that. So. All right, so we see from Kevin Pritchard, says, looks like tab notation and score editor got killed in version 14. Any timeline for it making return? So I've seen some people be able to do it, but I haven't figured out myself. So let's say if we come here, let's create we just come over here. So it could be maybe like based on a name. I was playing around with this over kind of the holiday break, but let's see if I. All right, so I'm just going to call this guitar because I wonder if it's like one of the things that when we look at it might be based upon the name. But I know it's one of the things that will be coming. I haven't figured out how to. Let me just see if it's in the instrument settings. But I know it's kind of planned. I've seen pictures of people that have it. Let's come over. Okay, so we say show rhythms in tablature and hit OK. Come here, I'll select these. Let's go to the instrument settings. So there we could see it. Yeah, that's how you do it. So we can say notation tablature. So you could do it just kind of like that. So make sure you go to the instrument settings and then select the instrument. And with guitar, you could say show rhythms in tablature, but we say the presentation is tablature only. And then you can see the guitar tab right there. So it is returned. I just learned how to do it. So. All right, wonderful to see Michael Marshall checking in from Somerset in the UK. All right, you see Pablo just says Gregolady, like I guess a Greg Melody. All right, Cornell says nice chords, Greg. I wish I remember what it was. All right, JVI is wishing everyone a belated Happy New Year. He's wishing everyone has a fantastic and musical 2025. All right, Joy Madhaven asks, when importing AAF files to stereo or split to two mono files, So I don't think that AAF files actually support stereo files. So AAF, I believe, is automatically going to split the stereo file to left and right. But once you have kind of like your left and right channels, if if we come over, with the stereo interleaved files, I think it's a limitation of the AAF format. Here, so let me just do a new project here. Let's import just a stereo file. All right, so it's export. Okay. So you see one audio is a multi-channel file. All right. So now when we go to import, we'll close this. So generally, there's a lot of programs that will automatically split when they export, as you saw the message, will automatically split the particular files, because not a lot of programs will actually read a stereo file in an AAF. So most programs, when they export, will split the channels. So wherever you're getting the files from, see if they have the ability to choose not to split the files. But generally, that's how it works. All right, so wonderful to see Mark Rabin on from Montana with his dog Stella. So everyone give a big woof to Stella. And yeah, they have snow and fog here. So yeah, we got about 9 inches of snow wrapped up last night here, with another storm maybe coming this Friday. So my son's all happy, missing school, extending his Christmas vacation. All right, so you see from Benny, he says, thanks, Greg. My friend had a wrong driver in his computer for the car. Now it works. So wonderful. Thanks for letting us know. Hope he's enjoying his interface. So we see Mark Rabin just saying today we have a hangout. So yeah, it's Tuesday today, but we don't have a Zoom meetup, just our normal live stream. All right, Paul Claridge asks, Greg, can you explain how the VCA faders are applied now in previous versions? I thought I just selected all the tracks I want to control and click on Add VCA Fader to selected tracks. I don't now. All right, so let's take a look. All right, so say I want to take all my drums and assign my drums to a VCA. All right, so I'm going to right click here, add tracks. It will add VCA tracks to selected tracks. And so there's my VCA that's controlling. So make sure that the tracks are selected, Paul. You know, it's easy sometimes not to select, but that seems to work. And I'll do it kind of one more time. So just select all the tracks, and from the mix console, it's not add VCA track, but add VCA tracks to selected tracks. And now so it seems to work as expected. Let me know if I did anything differently than you did, Paul. All right, we see Gerald Ely has made it back. Glad you're able to make it back in time. All right. See, Mark Rabin has the pain of living with a world famous dog. All right, JVI says, had a question. My old PC died. I do have the C drive. Where are all the hardware settings saved? I mean, specifically the audio connections. So I want to say that it might be in the RAM presets. Let me just take a look. We'll come over here. Let's go to Finder. And we'll go to the library. Let's see if in the preferences folder, there's a good chance that it might be in this particular file, the RAM presets. So if you want to extract those, try to maybe copy the RAM presets file over. I think it's going to be in there. Let me just see if there's a different XML file. Yeah, I think it's going to be in this particular file, and you could Google it on, you know, I'm sure you could Google it, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be in your presets, in the preferences, and the RAM presets. That contains kind of a number of different preset files, like your quantize presets, stuff like that. All right, so Cornell just saying, hey ho, let's go watch the live stream and smash the like button. So I think he is reading my markers. All right, Eric Giordana asks, hi Greg, is there a way to save external effect configurations? If I change interface and switch back, I lose all external effect connections. I have to redo them all from scratch. So I think that if we come over here and go to the audio connections, and let's say if we're in your external effects, that I would try to click here on favorites and add one as a favorite and see if that recalls the IO configurations. And so try doing it. I don't have a good answer as to why there's not just presets here. But I'll request that feature again. I see Mark Rabin's going to run a quick errand to a cell phone store. So thanks for joining us. All right, Chris just asked Greg, what is the hotkey to nudge MIDI notes? Okay. All right, so let's say we have our MIDI notes here. Let me just get rid of some of those. All right, so if we want to nudge select notes, I think it's just Control or Command plus the right arrow to go later in time, the left arrow to go earlier in time, and the time value is based on the quantize value, I believe. So now we do eighth notes. Or maybe it's set. So we set our grid here. So let's say if I use quantize, and now I wanted to nudge these by eighth notes, or let's say by 32nd notes. So it's just Control or Command and the left and right arrow. And you could set your nudge commands here to bar, beat, use to quantize, or adapt zoom. So if depending on how you're zoomed in. So I could nudge the event itself. If the MIDI events are the active window, like now, I could nudge just the particular event. So Command or Control plus the right arrow to nudge to the right, left arrow to nudge to the left or earlier in time. All right, so we see JVI says, don't see any hardware settings with all the audio inputs in control room, but perhaps I'm missing something. So, if they were saved as presets, you could, and make sure that when you get to audio connections that, you have your control room, that presets are, the control room is activated, so it may not recall. And if you had saved a profile, you could recall the profile and import that. All right, Mark Raven just saying gratitude for all the knowledge. Thank you, and our community is the best. Cubase family is number one. All right. All right. So Mark Raven is just asking if we Zoom today. So we'll do that at the end of the month. So no Zoom today. All right. So B Complex asks, says, hi, Greg. Thanks for stream. Is there any way to fine tune or snap one automation point to the exact amount of the previous one, or any tip for editing automation points smoothly? All right. So let's say if we have an automation point, like this question I get a lot. So let's say I'm doing an automation point here, and let's say here, and I want this node to snap kind of to the downbeat. So let's say I move this node here, and I want this node to go to to the grid. So I think if we just kind of so I have snap turned on. All right, so let's see if let's say if we zoom out, I want this node to be on a grid. You see that it's just kind of if it's not on a grid, it will kind of snap to the grid point here for you automatically. So if I want this to be on, this node to be on beat 4, we could see that that would automatically, so say if I turn my grid off, now it's not going to snap, but with the grid turned on, and if we set this to adapt to zoom by default, this will automatically snap that point to the musical grid, just like so. So if I want to get a little off, we could just come here, and if I just choose snap to beat, now I could only place it on the beat. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to work with. But if you, let's see, if you want it to be, as I reread this, let's say you want it to be the same value as, like this one to be the same value as the previous one. So let's say, so if you want like the same value, so if we come here, let's say we look at our values minus 14.1, we could copy that. Let's go to the next node, paste. So you could paste a node. Let's see if there's any, if I hold down a modifier, if it snaps. Okay, so here I'm holding down the, so let's say I hold down, I just had it snap, let's see. Let's see if I hold down a modifier key here. Now I'm, right, so that's still minus 14.1. So it doesn't look like it'll snap the value vertically, but you could copy and paste that if you wanted to. Just seeing if there's any. So let's say I have both of these selected. Let's see if I select this. Yeah, I don't know a way of kind of snapping it to the previous value. Other than, like, if I select all these nodes. Yeah, I don't. I'll play around with that some more and see if I have a better answer for Friday. But you could snap it in time, but not necessarily to the same exact value. Okay, Recyclop asks, if I have a virtual instrument channel active with all MIDI inputs selected and I change volume on my DAW controller, it detunes the instrument, which CC value this is and how to reset the tuning. All right, so check to see. A lot of times what happens, and I see this with particular brands of controllers, M Audio Axiom comes to mind where I see this a lot, where if you're using the modulation wheel, and one of the things you could do is actually just kind of come over here to like the MIDI inserts. So I'm going to select the MIDI track. We'll go to our MIDI inserts, and let's go to the MIDI monitor. A lot of times when you move a controller, what can happen is that controller is on the same board as the pitch bend wheel. So a lot of hardware designs will, like as soon as if you use your modulation wheel or your pitch bend a lot, eventually sometimes when you move your modulation, your pitch bend will just kind of move along, or the pitch bend wheel gets loose. So make sure that, like, if you just put the MIDI monitor on a track, or if you look at a particular track, come over and go into the list editor, and this could be a bit more of a surgical editor, and see if there's any pitch bend data. So a lot of times controllers, like when that hardware connection starts to fray, it's pretty common for a lot of controllers to kind of just transmit or spit out MIDI pitch bend data. And often if people use like the modulation wheel a lot, so check to make sure that you don't have pitch bend data in your events. So if you go to the list editor, that's an easy way to find. But it sounds like maybe your controller is transmitting unexpected MIDI pitch bend data. All right, so Yassine El Belgetti asks, hi Greg, how can I modify drum kits in Groove Agent 5 and replace the samples? It works on Beat Agent, but not on the others. Sometimes I find fills I like, but I can't customize the quantize. So if we have a kit, so let me just open up a full Groove Agent so we can show the differences all at once. Okay. So Groove Agent's going to have like two different styles of drums. So you're going to have like an acoustic agent where it's like a virtual drummer. So we could come over and have this kind of play along. Or so when we look at so we have kind of like real acoustic drums, and then we're going to have another style where we could just say, let's come over and say, I want do laser beams here. So, all right. So now when we come over, so we can have so we could have kind of different instruments for here. I'll just do a different one. So when we're in an acoustic agent kit, we can't change the sounds because these are all kind of multi-mic'd. So the snare drum, we could, access the snare drum is going to be recorded slightly in hi-hat mics that we can control. It's going to be in the overheads, the room mics. So every one of these drum samples is meant to kind of be a cohesive statement because they were all sampled together in the same environment. And Beat Agent, we can replace sounds because these aren't like a multi-mic. They could be, but the intention is really kind of dragging and dropping your own samples. Now, if we wanted to do editing of the patterns, we could drag these particular patterns. So let's say I'm in my, we'll come over to, let's say my Groove Agent patterns. So when we go Groove Agent, we could now choose to drag the particular patterns directly into our timeline if we wanted to. So if we wanted to just kind of come right here, we could drag those patterns directly into the timeline if we need it to edit. The full version of Groove Agent, so we could do that. So the included version of Cubase, the included version of Groove Agent rather, that comes with Cubase, you could have one agent. Now the full Groove Agent that's sold separately or comes as part of Absolute 6, we can now come directly over here and we can see our multiple agents. And when we want to go to a pattern, we could also choose, to edit the particular pattern that we want as well. So if we wanted to see, particular patterns, we have like a mini drum editor that we can edit within inside of Groove Agent. So let's say if I just remove this, let me just cut this kit. So now when we go, to our particular pattern, we could go to the agent, and then, we could actually just having so now when we come over here to the patterns, we could actually edit the patterns inside of Groove Agent to do programming. This isn't in the Groove Agent SE, but the full Groove Agent, we could choose to edit those particular MIDI patterns within the instrument. So there's some differences, but with the Groove Agent SE, if that's what you have, just drag it out to the project window and then you could edit it as MIDI data very easily. All right, Recyclop says, I haven't yet purchased the Cubase IC Pro, but can I create an imaginary MIDI remote surface and use it on my phone over the Cubase IC Pro app? So yeah, you could have, not only mixing, Q mixes, transport control. So if you're instead of running to get to your vocal mic in the next room, you could control that, but also you could have different hotkeys programmed as well, so that you want to undo, rewind, fast forward, record, punch in. All right, so Robert Gentry says, please mention a team to add a choice for control click to only cut the top layer of stacked audio tracks. It's a deal. It's a huge deal for my editing gigs, and I've been a loyal user. So I'll mention again, but I was trying to remember before the live stream today, what function, because I thought I had kind of a method or an approach to doing it earlier. I know I couldn't remember. I'll make sure to kind of search through the live streams. So if we are here, of how to cut, but maybe Robert, if you could remind me, because I thought we discussed this on previous live streams of only being able to cut. Let me just see if there was an editing preference. Don't think it was delete overlaps. But yeah, if you remember, kind of I know it was, you may have viewed it as kind of workaround, but what I did earlier, but I will make sure to reiterate it to the team, Robert. right, so we see Gerald Ely's, check out. All right, so we see Mark King just says, I'm using BFD3 to send outputs for various drums for processing within Cubase. I name the outputs kick, snare, hat, etc. I can do it with visibility configs, but it's a lot of work. So I'll see if I can come up with kind of like a faster approach. But let me know if you have like the same names for your outputs consistently. All right. All right, so we see Hamo 1974 checking in from Finland. All right, so we see Cubase 14 to MediaBay isn't seeing some of my MIDI files, but if I drag the file from the Mac Finder into the arranged timeline, the MIDI imports and playback perfectly. I rescanned a folder, but no luck. So let's see, I think I have some MIDI files that are on my, is it all MIDI files or just some MIDI files? So let's say if we jump over here to MediaBay. So I think on my desktop, I'm going to just look for only MIDI files. And here's all of my MIDI files that are on my desktop. So, and then I could, drag these particular files in to my project. So, but let me know if it's every file, if it's, and make sure that your desktop is checked as an active location within MediaBay, and that you have the actual particular like your files of type set in MIDI files is set as opposed to MIDI loops. MIDI loops are similar to MIDI files, but they will actually load up a VST instrument with the correct sound. So check those things and see, but it looks like it's, my MIDI files are accessible from MediaBay right there. So. All right, we see Nick has to check out. We'll see you on Friday, Nick. All right, so IUL is wishing everyone a creative and healthy 2025. All right, my chat field just moved. All right, so next question from Yassine El Belgetti. How can I record a live performance and have it automatically quantized in Groove Agent using my MIDI keyboard, just like a real drum machine? All right, so let's say we have... All right, so say I just want to come here, and I would just put on the auto quantize. So I'm going to come... All right, and let me just, okay, so let's say I put on my click track here. So I'm going to click on auto quantize, and let's make my quantize value for eighth notes. All right, so now we look at it on the grid here. Let me just, and everything will be quantized to straight eighth notes. So just as you select your quantize value here, so let's say, okay, I want to do 16th notes now. So now we come over here, everything will be perfectly quantized to the 16th note because we have the AQ enabled while we record it. Okay, so we have a question from Bratman Studios. Says rendering a MIDI track and then mute the MIDI track. Is that the same thing as turning off the MIDI so it doesn't take any more resources for the CPU, thus lessening the latency? So muting the MIDI track won't affect the, it's just not going to play back. The instruments are still loaded, so that's not going to affect any of your CPU or audio performance usage. What will affect it is if that track is frozen. So if we choose to freeze the track, that will render it in the background as an audio file. So that will unload the particular instruments. We could choose to unfreeze. I will delete the freeze files. Or once you've rendered in place, and once you've rendered in place and turned it into audio, what you could do is just right click and disable the selected tracks. So then that will free up the system resources. So like those things will make a difference. So if you want to free up the resources, disable the track or render in place, that'll be the most reliable method. All right, Yassine asks, can I control the 4 kits in Groove Agent 5 with different controllers, with each kit being controlled by a separate controller? So yes, all you have to do is, let's say we're going to add an instrument track. We'll do our full Groove Agent, okay? And this will work as MIDI channel 1, MIDI channel 2, MIDI channel 3, MIDI channel 4. So each agent will be on its own MIDI channel. So we add our Groove Agent. I'm going to now add 3 MIDI tracks. And I'll start this at MIDI channel 2. So this would be agent 1, agent 2. So you see, as we select a track, we can see the agent reflected. That's right there. And then for each of these tracks, we would just set a separate MIDI input. So I can say, I want my panorama MIDI in. I want this coming from my Korg, my UR24C input port. I want this coming from, so don't select all inputs, my nano control. And I want this coming from, my, this. So now each agent can have an independent MIDI port, so that each agent can be played by a different MIDI controller. Okay, we had a question from Hoodboy Terry, how to add that key to the top bar. So you want to come up to the top controls here, right click, and then make sure, and this will open up the setup toolbar, and make sure that you have the project root key checked. If for some reason it's checked and you still don't see it, what you can do is just simply move this up visually, and as you move it up, it's going to move it more to the left. So again, right click, you'll see project root key, turn that on, and then you'll see it become available right here. All right, so Benny is just asking about an update on an email. So I haven't heard anything from Steinberg, but there's probably catching up over the holidays. I think the office was closed. All right, so we see Randy is going to have some company show up. So thanks for joining us, Randy, from ProWash DFW. All right, so Bratman Studio, I guess this question about many of his MIDI tracks are going to external synths, like his Mini Freak 2600. I'll render them when finalized. It's just MIDI data, not driving a VST. So if it's just MIDI data, that's not really taking up system resources. So you don't have to worry about that. It's when the actual when the actual plugins are being generated in a software basis, like a VST instrument, that's when it would matter. So if it's external instruments, that's not really having any like audio performance issues with your particular setup. So that's working independently. All right, so we see from Hood Boy Terry, some of my plugins are not appearing in Cubase. So if they're, it'll need to be a VST, a 64-bit plugin to start with, so no 32-bit plugins. If we go to your studio, let's go to your VST plugin manager. And here what you do, if it's a VST2 plugin, you'll see a little icon. I'm on Apple Silicon Mac, and I'm running natively, so VST2 doesn't work on Apple Silicon. So you would have to switch the app, right-click on the app if you're running Mac OS, if you have VST2 plugins, and run it in Rosetta mode. But if you're on Windows, you may see just a VST2 plugins are going to be kind of bypassed by default. And then you could just say, you'll see a little icon here that will enable you to run your VST2 plugins. So they still work. It's been since 2008, so 17 years ago, VST3 was introduced. So. All right, great to see Best Green Jesus is lurking, and wonderful to see Brian Sawyer from Beulahville, North Carolina. All right, next question we have from Yassine is, how can I delete a layer in a pad? Could you also provide some usage context for the 4 kits in Groove Agent 5? Okay. All right, so let's come over here. So let's say we have our Groove Agent open here. I'm making my own pad here. So let's go to my favorites. Let's say some drum one shots here. Okay, so I'm going to drag all these onto a pad. Okay, so now you can see that as I click, I have these set to automatically. So when we go, I think we go to our sample here, we could have these. So as we do this, let me just okay. So we could have these automatically switch. I could have all these snares layered. Or we could have these switched by velocity. So we go into the main tab here. We could just choose, so now it's velocity. We could have different samples actually just based upon the velocity level. Now if we wanted to delete one of these layers, I think we just hit the, let's see if we undo that. Let's cut the sample. No. All right, let me just see if we can remove just one on the pad. All right, so delete, we'll delete all of them. See, we could set the velocity range to be within just 2 values, but let me just... Let's see, cut, removes them all. Remove samples, removes them all. Let's see if there's a way in here, maybe. I don't know a way to, I may have to do some more research on that, but it looks like I'm not seeing a way to just remove the one sample. All right, so I'll do some more research on that. Sorry about that. And it says, could you provide some useful context for the 4 kits in Groove Agent? So, you know, a lot of times, you know, contemporary productions will have different kinds of projects going on. So let me just come over here. We just cut that kit. So let's say we'll start with a simple pattern. So let's come over here. Let's load a kit with agents. So I want this to be right. So we have, let's say, this pattern going on. All right. So let's say I have that pattern, but maybe I want it a more contemporary kit as well. So I'm going to go to pattern 2. And I'll load up, say, a different pattern here. I'll go to the mixer. So I'll come over to this. Let's get to the pattern. Let's try a different. And on this one, let's go ahead and load up a different agent. Let's do like maybe a percussion agent. And let's load up maybe like a jazz kit here. So now we could just kind of take these 4 different agents. And while we have like one pattern, we can now just come over here and say, okay, now let's add the and I wanted to bring in, let's say, the kick from this one. You could have one that's just melodic instruments just to do bass line, stuff like that. So, you know, again, in contemporary productions, not every song is just acoustic or electronic. It's going to be kind of a hybrid approach between so many different kits. All right. All right, so we have the Modern Mind just saying hello. Thanks for joining us. All right, and the Modern Mind asks, please talk about gain staging. Okay, so let's say, you know, gain staging is, there's a lot of people, I think it's pretty easy concept. So let's say we have our drums playing here. All right, so we look at our mix console and we can say, okay, I want these to be I don't want it too loud. I don't want it too soft. Where a lot of people make mistakes in gain staging is having something that's too soft and then having to send that to another source. So if we recorded something very soft here and I want to add a group track to the selected. So some people may try to make up for gain here. If something was recorded too low, they may try to use other tools to increase the gain. Right, and there's a lot of great tools to do this. So we could add more gain here. But as we add more gain, we could be causing more distortion. And then people would often now come over here and try to run a compressor plugin because the gain structure is too low. Now we're changing the tonality of the gain. Whereas we could just kind of work with your gain initially, kind of get the record level good. If you're recording, but try not to have to make up or to take away from gain because the initial levels are bad. So if you've recorded audio, make sure that they're not too low or too soft and that or too loud, so that you have to kind of artificially boost them. That's when people get into problems. But it's pretty simple, try to keep, to the point where you don't have to do a lot of work to get the gain at an optimum level. Just record at minus 6, minus 12 dB. That's a great place to be recording. And as you're summing multiple tracks together, you're not going to be clipping or running into where everything sounds really low and you try to artificially boost it with a plug-in at the end because the gain structure of the mix was wrong to start with. All right, FlyV just asks, Greg, I've never used external effects in my external instrument. Shows as not connected. Could you show me how to set up one external effect? Okay, so let's say I'm over here and we want to go to our studio connection. So if we have available inputs and outputs on our audio interface, we could go out into the real world of hardware and then back in. So what we need to do is make sure, hang on one second. We need to make sure that we have available inputs and outputs for our external effects. So let's say if we have an external effect, we will need to have a send. So this is going to be an output. And we're going to say, let's go to this output. And what we want to do is, so this signal is going to go, when we go out to this compressor, we want to send it out. So the audio output of our device. Then we're going to connect it into the device. The output of the hardware is then going to be connected into our return bus. So if you're going to external effects, often you need to send out and back in. With external instruments, we may send MIDI information out, and then we just have a return channel so that we could just, at this point, take the analog outputs of your instrument. It could be a digital output if your instrument and your audio interface have those digital connections. And we could take those and tell it where these actual devices, where these devices are coming in from. So when we go to add an external effect, so let's say we go to an audio track, I go to my inserts, we'll see external plugins. So once we say, okay, we put our distressor on here, we have this little thing that says measure delay, because this could have a latency going out of the computer into the device and back into the computer. So we could measure the delay of that signal path and compensate for the external hardware. And at this point, we could choose to, and now the audio is being routed directly out. And when we do a virtual instrument, sorry, I need my afternoon coffee, fighting off and on. We would just see our external instrument, and then we could see, okay, we want this to go out to my Mini Freak. And now, once we add the Mini Freak, we could now play any of the MIDI inputs, send it out, and the audio from the instrument is coming back into Cubase, and then we could run it through our different effects processors. All right. Connell Jacinto Real Estate asks, hi Greg, Happy New Year. Could you please demonstrate effect automation using any effect? Sure, so let's take a look. Let's say we have Groove Agent going on here. So just solo. All right, let me just check my connections here. do another project where it makes more sense. All right. All right, so when we're automating different effects, we will come over here, and let's say we have an effect on our vocal. Let's say our reverb. All right, so if I want to now come over here and automate my effect level changes, I'm going to click on W on the track. So say I want to bring more of the reverb in. We'll add too much reverb. And now I'm going to open up the plugin itself. And I'm going to click on W. All right. And then, so that's kind of really all you'd have to do. Sorry about that. Let's just show it again here real quickly. So again, just kind of come over here. Automate the parameters. So we could automate the send levels. Just click on W. Open up the plugin. Now we'll rewind a little bit. So you see my, and now we'll see the plugin start to get edited. So just click on W and R if you're automating the plugin, automate that, and you will see that the automation for the effect send will show up here. And when we go to our effect return, let's see our effects channels, and we'll come to the reverence, and since we automated the reverence, we could see the output automation right there. All right, Drums Clark just asked, I got a great deal on Dorico Pro 5. How do I import Dorico into Cubase Artist 12? So if you export a standard MIDI file, you could have your projects go back and forth. If you have Cubase Pro 14, is now the score engine has been updated so that we can now come over and just say that you could take a project once we're in like the score editor. I'll show it on this part here. And we could choose to export directly to a Dorico project. So 14, the Cubase Pro version will have kind of the Dorico engine inside of it, but in earlier versions you could if you want to export from Dorico into Cubase, you could just simply export it as a standard MIDI file. Okay, so we have from Benny, he says, okay, so having trouble getting a drop on MIDI bass, like sliding from A down to E. Any tips? Okay. So some instruments will have like some of these natural kind of transitions kind of set up in them. But let's say if we want to come over, and one of the ones that's pretty good for this is going to be the electric bass that comes in absolute 6 or sold separately. All right, so I'll just sequence some nonsensical bass part here. Okay. All right, so when we have this particular instrument open, one of the things that you'll have as part of the instrument are like these little kind of transitions. Let me just... And you can see that when you hit it with soft velocity. So let's just drop that note in. All right, so it's just... Alright, so let me just come over here, check what pitch I'm hitting. So you could do like some different transitions, kind of like that, and just because this instrument and let's make this note like softer velocity. So depending on the instrument, you could have kind of natural transitions. So, you know, check out like the electric bass instrument from Steinberg. As a bass player, I like it a lot. So just a wonderful instrument, sound set, and it's kind of set up for those natural transitions. But if you're doing more like a synth bass, you know, doing pitch bend. So if I wanted to come over and So if we want to do something similar, like we could just set the MIDI pitch bend range between the two notes here. And we could draw in, so let's say we could just do pitch bend, and we could extend this note out to the next one starts. I'll try moving this both up an octave. So doing stuff like that, and sometimes the instruments themselves will allow you to have kind of glides. So when you want to come over here, you could have the pitch automatically glide between two pitches. And you could have the glide time set up here. And that will automatically glide the pitch down. So it could really depend on the instruments. All right, so you see Kai Wen Franklin just says when having issues running Groove Agent 5 on a MacBook Pro in standalone mode. So just try it real quick here. Go to my applications. I think I have it installed. So it kind of seems to function here as expected. All right, so you see from B Complex says, thanks for snapping automation answer. Copying will do just for info. Other DAWs, you use control. Yeah, there's usually something like that. I'll just try one more time here, see if I can. But there's usually like some similar shortcut for many things inside of Cubase. So let's. I thought I had it snap. To the same value with some modifier key. I'll play around with it some more, see if I can have a better answer for Friday. Sorry about that. All right, Alexandros Gaglias asks, hi Greg, is there a way to show pitch bend data in a score editor and export it as Dorico or XML file? Well, pitch bend isn't actually a MIDI note message, so it's just bending, and every, and MIDI pitch bend is actually set. It's not an actual note value. It's, when you go to MIDI pitch bend, for instance, in, your instrument, you could set the range of pitch bend up and down. So if you have pitch bend information that's in the project, like we just did in this retro log, so let's say if we have our pitch bend, this pitch bend would function completely different and have different pitches depending on a playback instrument. So many orchestral instruments may not do pitch bend. It could be set to a semitone, to a whole tone, or an octave, or 2 octaves. So there's no real uniform way of translating pitch bend into an actual pitch, because the pitch bend is just this data, and this is working on scale depending on the playback instrument. So with that, it's hard to translate it into notation, because notation is going to show specific pitches, but pitch bend could change the values depending on every single instrument's pitch bend settings. So there isn't going to be a viable way to have that make sense. Wonderful to see Michael Pierce on. Thanks for joining us today. So I'm just curious how Jazz Dude is liking his Mac Mini M4. All right, you see Gareth says hi to everyone. Hope he's doing well. All right, Vagard Wolf Divik. This is about the mix soundtrack and saw the live stream. Procrastination much? You just have to hit the like button. All right, so we see X and X blackout or something. Is it possible to get Cubase to scan an entire drive? I'm a newbie and can't find half of my instruments. So if it's your instruments, there's not a scan necessarily that does that. The VST3 plugins will all be installed into the same location. If you're not seeing like VST2 plugins and you're on like Windows platform, if you're on the Mac platform, you'd have to run Cubase in Rosetta mode on the Windows platform. Go to your studio menu to VST plugin manager, and you'll see a little button here to enable VST2 plugins. Turn that on, and then it should allow you to run your VST2 plugins. You'll probably see them there. Tim Weinheimer says he had an issue with Howling 7 missing sound content, but looks like the issue has resolved itself. Yeah, sometimes it could be scanning for content in the background. All right. Another weather alert. Guess we'll have a lot of those from my Echo device. All right, so we see a question. Love the new drum machine, but it's super tiny on my screen. Anyone know if they plan to update it with resizing? So currently, it's designed to run, effectively on, you're in the lower zone is kind of what it's intended for. So it was like, specifically designed so that everything is available and accessible in the lower zone. We could obviously kind of run it over here. I don't know if there's plans to make it resizable, but if you're running like a 4K screen, I know it could be small, but I'll make sure to pass that along as feedback. Okay, so we see this question is directed to Jazz Dude. It says, just talking about VST3 plugins, I feel like they're all scattered and many aren't even organized by instrument type by default. Some are company name, which gets confusing. So when you're in the VST plugin manager, so VST2 plugins could be installed anywhere, and it's a bit chaotic because every company would install them to different plugin folders. So VST3, it's going to be unified and it all goes into a common folder. But VST2 plugins don't do that. So, but once you go to your VST plugin manager, you could come over here and choose to, you see this little setup window. You can say, okay, I want to sort by vendor. I want to sort by category or company, so you could do that independently for VST effects and VST instruments. There's a lot of companies that don't do the proper, the really simple thing of doing metadata, saying this is a piano instrument, this is a sampler, and it's, so you could click on the plus sign and create a new, you could come over here, let's call this Jan 7th. All right, and now we could come over here and you could change and make your own folders, and you could have any number of different types of, and have your plugins organized how you want to. So take advantage of that. All right, so we just see how do you work with the project root key. So, like if you have loops and those loops have the metadata of root key information. Let me see, it may have a project that's kind of set up for this. Just trying to see. All right, so I'll just make one up here quickly. Okay, so let's say we have a quick drum loop going on. Okay, so I have this going on, playing. All right, so now we could see that when we go to, let's say, all right, so let's say I want to come over here and we'll set our project root key. Okay, so I'm going to right click up top here. All right, and I want this to be in the key of E. I'm going to come over here in my MediaBay and we're going to say, okay, play in E. Now, if these are loops have root key data, so even if this is playing in a completely different key, I could activate it now, and it's going to play in the key of E because I'm telling it to match the audio to the project root key. All right, so say So now we could have these automatically follow the project root keys. And if I now change my project root key here, let's say, okay, I want it to be in C sharp. And all of my material that's kind of, you know, pitch based will automatically follow the project root key. Okay. Pablo says he wants to buy the Songwriters kit. That's a great one. All right, reading through comments. All right, Mike Maven just asked, on Drum Machine, is there a way to separate the pads onto their own track for export purposes? All right, so let's say I want to take this, and let's add a Drum Machine as a quick pattern event. All right, so I'm going to come over. First, what I want to do is I'm going to select the different pads here, and we go to the group, and I could say now I want the outputs here of the group to go to, like, my drums, my kick to go to out 2, and I want my snare and clap to go to output 3, and let's say my open hi-hat I want to go to output 4. Okay, so now I'm going to come over here to the editor. All right. Okay, so now we go into my mix console. I can see that we have the kick snare. So what I want to do now is I'm going to drag this pattern onto my timeline, and let's copy it. And I think we can just do a render in place. Let's go to my render settings. I'm going to choose channel settings. So I have these in my project window. I click render, and now I can have my kick. And they're just rendered out. So in the drum machine, just simply come right over here, and like when we go to the drum machine track, go to the group, and then all your outputs, and then just render in place, and it'll be all set. All right, so we got two questions that were mailed in. Let me go to those before we run out of time. All right, So we have a question. Hello, Greg. Please explain to us if there's a button in Hallion to change the velocity curve of the keyboard pressure. I don't see it, and how to... Okay, so let's take a look at Hallion 7. Okay, so let's add an instrument track here. So if we want to adjust kind of the velocity, let's say, okay, I'm going to do just a sample instrument. I'll drag a file in here. I think when we go to edit the sound, here we can see our velocity curve. So if you want to switch between your different kind of preset rhythms here, we can just scroll right through all of your different velocity curves there. And next question, how to upload sample formats like Akai, EXS, 24 Giga, Contact, etc. in Hallion. Thank you very much. So we could do all those formats, and if it's a copy protected Contact instrument, that's not going to work. But if we go over to the right zone here and we click on plus and go to browser, and what you need to do is just go to that particular sound set, whether it's connected to a CD-ROM or whatever you have set up. At this point, we can just come right over here and then navigate to it, and then we could import those different sample formats, those different sample libraries. Sometimes it's going to be on a CD-ROM, and that CD-ROM is not read natively by the computer because it's formatted to a different format. So that may be the case, but this you could navigate to like your CD-ROM or wherever your samples are. All right, our next question was if we had a sound going to one instrument and we wanted it to play back from a different instrument. So let's say, and how to do this easily. So let's say if I have this piano playing, and we can see that this instrument is now going out of the grand. All right, so if I wanted this to go out of a different instrument, I'll come over, let's just add, so I'll do this, let me do it from an instrument track. I'll just do another. Go here. So we want to easily just kind of transform the playback of one instrument to another instrument. Okay, so let's take this little part here, and we can see that in our instrument rack, this is the instrument that's playing back. So if I wanted to change this to, let's say, the grand, what we could do is just, where we see the name highlighted here, click, and we could just load up a different instrument. So let's say, okay, let's do the grand, and let's load up, let's say, or C7. And now, this way we don't have to unload the other instrument. I could just switch the instrument right here from the VSTi rack in the right-hand zone. All right, let's jump back to our live questions. Thanks for all the great questions from everyone. We have a couple minutes left, trying to catch up. Flyv just says, thanks for all the help, Greg, so you're welcome. All right, Mark Rabin just says, Stella says a big woof. The Jazz Dude says Cubase is 36 years old now. It's in its midlife crisis. Going to need a Harley soon. So. Maybe we'll go for a Porsche. Stay true to its German heritage. Okay, so Millard Brown, great to see you on. Says thanks for the help and great answers. I think I may have caught up. Let me just see. I think I got through all the questions. So see if there's any more. We have about 2 minutes left, but if there's no other questions, we'll wrap up just a couple minutes early. Thanks for all the wonderful questions we had today. I hope that everyone has learned a new tip or trick. If you have, make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit the like button. That allows us to continue to offer this. And I appreciate everyone just, being part of such a wonderful community. All right, so we see a quick question. Any plans for virtual guitar VST? So, we used to do the virtual guitars, but there are, within the Hallian instruments. So say if we come over here to a Hallian Sonic, or there are like the T guitar and M guitar. So if you wanted to, these are for acoustic guitars. It's I know the virtual guitars was electric, but here if you wanted to check out if you need acoustic guitar strumming, this is a pretty fabulous instrument with that. All right. All right, so you see Michael Pierce says a yellow Porsche. So we'll probably get a red one, and red is the company color. So, all right, so with that, I think we are just about out of time. Thanks again for all the wonderful questions, and it's just wonderful to be part of the community. I appreciate everyone for participating in the live stream. We'll be doing this again on Friday. Just a quick programming note, a heads up, on the week of the 20th, I will be out at the NAMM show, so January 20th. So we won't be doing live streams that week. And then a couple, 2 weeks in February, I may have to miss a Friday live stream. I may try to do it on Saturday for one or two of them. I have some other conferences I need to speak at. In Cleveland and San Antonio. But with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. And I appreciate everyone so much. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you back on Friday. Take care.